Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today we are going to be talking about some of my favourites that I've read this year. Coming in a little bit late, I know there's the kind of mid-year book tag that people do, but given that I started BookTube relatively recently, I'm going to cut myself some slack and I'm just going to go through some of my favourites that I've read. In no particular order, it's just going to be a couple of books that really stuck out for me and that I'm definitely recommending to friends of mine. So the first book is the first book in a quartet by John Gwynne, and that is Malice. I really enjoyed Malice. I know for a lot of people, Malice wasn't necessarily their favourite one. I think a lot of people find that the third or the fourth book is their favourite, but I really liked it as an entryway into the world. I think the introduction of the characters was fantastic. I loved the different perspectives. I loved that it started off as a typical kind of epic fantasy, and then towards the middle of the book, it really started to pick up and turn some of the tropes on their head, which I really enjoyed. And I also think that the world building, the setting, the kind of history of the different people was really fascinating. I think John Gwynne does an amazing job of creating a really realistic and compelling world that you feel a part of. So I gave that book 5 stars, which I think is quite surprising to a lot of my friends who read Malice, but I really enjoyed it. I really liked the introduction of the characters, the introduction of the world, the plot. It was just done really well. So 5 stars. The next book is by the same author and in the same quartet. It is the last book in The Faithful and the Fallen, and that is Wrath. Wrath was... those last 200 pages were absolutely insane. I mean, the whole book was insane, but those last 200 pages in particular were just batshit crazy. And I really enjoyed it. So I ended up actually taking a little bit of a break in between the third book and the fourth book. I hit a really bad reading slump. I think it was maybe 2 months ago or something. And everything that I was reading, none of it was just gelling with me. And it was super frustrating. And I ended up pausing I think it was in the middle, maybe it was actually towards more of the beginning of the book, the first quarter of the book, where I just stopped. But then I picked it up last month and I blitzed through it, and then I read Wrath. I think it was in 2 days because I was just absolutely hooked. I also just wanted to know what happened at the end. And even though I guessed some of the kind of key points in the ending, I thought it was executed really well. The character endings were fantastic. The deaths of some of the bad guys were just so satisfying. And it was a really great conclusion, and it's firmly placed John Gwynne at the top of my author list. So amazing, amazing work, and I can't wait to read more of his books. The next book on my favourites list of this year is a short book. It was a short story written by Brandon Sanderson, who is, I'm a big fan of Brandon Sanderson. I like his work. I think he writes really beautifully intricate stories. I think he does plot incredibly well. And when I want a really plot-driven book, I will go to Brando Sando for sure. And The Emperor's Soul is a story I didn't really know what to expect from it. It's very, very short. I think it's about 160, 170 pages. I read it in one go, and it's what Brandon Sanderson does well, just in a really, really short book. And I was so surprised. I was so pleasantly surprised that I gave it 5 stars, because I've never given a novella 5 stars. I don't think I've ever given a novella more than 3.5, maybe 4. And I just wanted this book to keep going. I wanted it to be longer. I wanted to spend more time with the characters, and I just loved it. I thought it was really quick. The pacing was fantastic. No page was wasted, no word was wasted. And he does an amazing job of creating tension in a really short amount of time. So if you're looking for a short read, and if you're even looking for an introduction to Brandon Sanderson, I'd strongly recommend reading The Emperor's Soul. The next one on my list is not going to be a surprise to anybody if you've watched not my previous video, but the one before that, and that is The Winter Road by Adrian Selby. I'm not going to talk about it too much because I've done a whole dedicated review on it. I gave it 4.5 stars. I think I'm just going to give it 4.5. Excellent book, excellent writer, plot, characters, pacing, dialogue, just really well done. The reason why I didn't give it 5 is because of a slight pacing issue at the beginning, but honestly the payoff is worth it, and I adore him as an author. bought the rest of his books, and just go read him. Just take my word for it, please, and just go read his books. They're fantastic. Down to the last three. So the next one is Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. I've not read much Jane Austen. I read a lot of Austen at school. I read Emma, Pride and Prejudice. I think we read Mansfield Park, but I'll be honest with you, when school teaches you to read books, they don't teach you to enjoy books. They shove it down your throat, and it's a really horrible experience. I mean, there's so many books that I read when I was younger at school that I've reread now as an adult, and I love them, but I remember hating them as a child or as a young adult. And I hate the way that we are taught literature in school. It just really frustrates me. But anyway, I read Sense and Sensibility, I think it was 2 months ago, and I loved it. I really love the way that she writes prose. I love the way that her characters do grow throughout the book. And I thought I also love the tongue-in-cheek humor that is pretty present in Austen's books. And it firmly cemented her as an author that I just need to read more of. And I ended up purchasing Pride and Prejudice next. So I'm actually planning to read her books in publication order. I will try to read Pride and Prejudice this year, but I'm not sure if I'm realistically going to be able to, but it is on my hit list for this year. So I ended up giving Sense and Sensibility 4 stars. It was a close 4.5, but I ended up kind of erring on the side of caution, I guess. But it's fantastic. I think it's one of her lesser known or lesser read books, but Sense and Sensibility is fantastic, and I strongly recommend it. All right, down to the last two. So the penultimate book that I really enjoyed this year that I was very surprised about was The Firekeepers Daughter. Firekeepers Daughter was recommended to me by Charmaine and Ajna, whose bookstagrams I will link down below. And I had very little knowledge of what this book was about. I had very little expectation going into it, but it really surprised me. I really enjoyed it. I really liked that it was set in a world, set in an environment that I myself am not particularly familiar with, set in a community that I'm not particularly familiar with. And I just thought the author did a really great job of executing so many different themes in this story. You have themes of family, identity, friendship, loyalty, and it's all kind of set in the backdrop of a crime that is committed, and there's tension, there's frustration, there's anger, but there's love and there's happiness, and there's like moments of joy as well. It's a very emotional book, but I really loved it, and I'm curious. I think it's a debut novel, which is crazy to me. I can't believe that's her debut novel, but whatever she writes next, I will definitely be reading it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. The only reason why I gave it 4 stars is pacing was a little bit off for me at the start of the book. And throughout the book, it would be really intense 1 minute and then really kind of slow the next. I don't know. Pacing is a big thing for me. I don't like things that kind of swap in terms of pace too quickly. But anyway, that's very much a personal preference as a caveat. So buy it, read it, enjoy it. It's fantastic. You'll love it. And then the last book I am going to mention, which I technically haven't finished yet. I've got about 50 pages to go, and I will be finishing it at some point today. That is The Kingdom of Copper, which is the second book in the David Bat trilogy. It's amazing. I really enjoyed the first book. I gave the first book 4 stars. I actually think I'm going to lower that rating a little bit because I think the second book is so much better than the first book that there needs to be a bigger gap between the two. But I don't know. I like supporting authors, and she seems awesome. So I'm probably going to just keep it at 4. But it is a borderline 3.5, 4 for me, probably more on the 3.5 side. But Kingdom of Copper is phenomenal. Within the first 3 chapters, I knew I was going to give it 5 stars. I've got 50 pages left, still at 5 stars. She's going to have to really mess up the last couple of pages to deter me from that rating, but I have faith in Chakraborty that I'm gonna love it. So Kingdom of Copper, definitely 5 stars. Straight after this, I'm going to be reading the next book, which I'll be very surprised if that's not a 5 stars either. So love the story, love the characters, love the plot, love the world that it's set in and the mythology, because it's a mythology that is relatively familiar to me, but I've never read it in a fantasy setting. So loving it, and I strongly recommend that you read it. And those are the books that I've really enjoyed this year. There are a couple of others that I haven't mentioned, but I really wanted to pick the ones that have stuck out in my mind. If you've read any of those, please let me know down below. If you haven't, you're considering it, let me know if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer them without any spoilers, of course. But it's been a decent reading year. I mean, there's not been as many 5 stars as last year at this point of the year, but anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care, be safe, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.